Pliosaurs were the Jurassic's most powerful predators and continued to dominate as apex predators into the early Cretaceous. Their four-flipper build gave them agility, and their enormous bone-crushing skulls defined the iconic pliosaur look. The biggest skull of the Mesozoic didn't belong to T-Rex, or Giganotosaurus, or even Spinosaurus. As impressive as those megatheropods chompers were, they were dwarfed by the ocean-going giants like Sachicasaurus and Pliosaurus, which had skulls up to 2.5 meters long. We're going to cover the body size, phylogeny, and physiology of the Pliosauridae, going through taxon by taxon and discussing the factors that made them such a successful and iconic clade of gigantic marine carnivores. Thalassophonea hawkinsi is known from nearly 3 dozen specimens, an impressive number of fossil representatives for a taxon that's only been found in the United Kingdom. It was one of the first marine reptiles ever discovered, actually, and was thought to be a member of Pliosaurus proper from the 1830s until as recently as 1996, when it received its own genus after a study on its skull found differences between the two animals. Thalassophonea is one of the earliest pliosaurids known, and set the blueprint from the primitive forms with longer necks and smaller skulls. It still had a shorter tail and flippers than its non-pliosaurid relatives, which was suggested by a 2015 study to be an adaptation for chasing agile, fast prey. One characteristic that Thalassophonea shared with all plesiosaurs was endothermy. These large, sea-going reptiles weren't cold-blooded, as it's commonly called. They were fast-growing, extremely active, self-regulating hunters, which goes completely against their original depictions as sluggish brutes from a failed past. Phylogeny contains 3 species, ranging in size from 3.4 to 4.8 meters long. This specialized fish eater had long jaws with sharp conical teeth, perfect for grasping slippery prey in the water column and preventing their escape. Just as with Thalassophonea, you can see the beginning of divergence from the mainstream plesiosaur body plan. The neck is slightly shorter, along with the tail and fins, foreshadowing the robust macropredatory giants to come. As secondarily aquatic vertebrates, plesiosaurs needed a method to successfully and consistently reproduce in the water while still needing to breathe air. The solution? Live birth. We actually have fossils of pregnant plesiosaurs, and they took similar approaches as the much later whales did. Have one baby at a time and make it big. This may indicate that mothers engaged in relatively long-term parental care to ensure that their investments paid off, a behavior beautifully depicted in Prehistoric Planet. Attenboroughsaurus coniberi is named after one of the all-time greats of nature documentary narration, Sir David Attenborough himself, with the species name referring to the paleontologist William Conybeare. This early Jurassic predator had a typical primitive pliosaurid build, just as those we've covered so far, but was originally found with skin impressions. Those skin impressions demonstrated that pliosaurids had very smooth skin, ideal for increasing the body's hydrodynamic nature and increasing speed and agility underwater. This physiological trait allowed for pliosaurids to succeed as fast fish hunters in an early Jurassic era where parvipelvian ichthyosaurs, like the giant Temnodontosaurus, were the high-speed apex predators. Anguinax cygnoi doesn't have a great deal of publicly photographed material, but it does represent a significant change in proportions. Pliosaurids in the late Jurassic show shorter necks and larger skulls, indicating a shift from a fish-specialized diet to one aimed at larger prey. That trend will only become more extreme as time goes on. Marmornectes candrewii is another pliosaurid, this one even earlier than Anguinax, that demonstrates the slow shift to robusticity. This penguin-like shape is still capable of high speed while also adding physical power, capable of taking down fish as well as larger vertebrates. Eartosaurus powelli lived in the Middle Jurassic, at around the same time as Anguinax, and had long jaws filled with long sharp teeth that were adapted to a flesh-cutting lifestyle. The back of its skull was wide, allowing for significant muscle attachments that would give it a powerful bite force. It also has the most teeth out of any known pliosaurid, and those teeth, especially near the front of the jaws, were serrated, an adaptation that increases their slicing ability. The deep roots of those teeth gave them serious punching power as well. The late Jurassic Gyartosaurus breaks the trend of iconic Anglo-pliosaurids by living in what is now Cuba. It's only known from a partial skull and a handful of neck vertebrae, but their proportions are similar to other big-headed intermediate pliosaurids from the same time period. The great bulking up event affected pliosaurids all across the world. Ischirodon is only known from teeth, and its placement as a valid genus has been questioned. There's unfortunately not much else to say about it, but here it is in case you're the single Ischirodon fan on the planet. Within Pliosauridae, we find the thalassophonea, or ocean murderers, a subclade of pliosaurids characterized by shorter necks and enormous crushing skulls. Hellenistes philarchus is the first of this new kind of pliosaurid, a Middle Jurassic, middling-sized predator from England. Its hind limbs were larger than its forelimbs, giving it additional power and agility when pursuing prey in the water column. Varying between 3 and 4.3 meters long, it was a fairly small pliosaur, but did a good job of typifying the thalassophonian build that would come to dominate for the rest of the group's evolutionary history. Pliosaurus is the pliosaur, the taxon from which the family derives its name. Remains of this genus were first discovered over 200 years ago in England and were thought to belong to an exceptionally robust Plesiosaurus. Now recognized as containing half a dozen species, Pliosaurus includes the most massive pliosaurids known from the fossil record. It's also the biggest macropredator of the entire Jurassic period, factoring in the bigger specimens. Pliosaurus rossicus, from Russia as the name indicates, unfortunately has most of its original material destroyed, but not before it was described as an enormous pliosaurid. At over 10 meters and 13 tons, it's on par with the highest estimates for the biggest land predators of all time, and has a skull more than 2 meters long. The back of its skull was extraordinarily tall, giving it tremendous leverage for its biting muscles to take advantage of. That made its bite strong, sure, but also fast, a trait that would serve it well as an enormous pursuit predator. Pliosaurus cavani is a newer addition to the club, only described in 2013. It was famously known as Predator X before its publication, and while pre-publication estimates exaggerated its size considerably, at nearly 9 meters long and over 8 tons, it's still one of the biggest carnivores to ever swim in Earth's oceans. Pliosaurus carpenteri and Pliosaurus westburiensis were described in the same 2013 paper. These two, along with the original Pliosaurus brachydurus, form the node of smaller species that are still comparable to large orcas. Pliosaurus funke is the monster of the group. The largest of the species, the Abingdon pliosaur, known simply as Archeon, is over 11 meters long and nearly 15 tons. That's almost 3 times the size of an African elephant. A 2014 biomechanical study found that Pliosaurus as a genus would have attacked prey by crushing them directly with its enormous jaws. No subtlety about this apex predator. Cymolestes vorax was a small thalassophonian, at just over 4 meters long. It likely focused on smaller, hard-shelled prey, crushing them with its wide jaws and getting nutrition from the soft innards of the armored cephalopods like belemnites and ammonites. The largest specimen was recently reassigned to Lorrainosaurus kinlani, which terrorized Middle Jurassic France and added yet another drop in the bucket of mid-sized thalassophonians that dominated the Jurassic. If I had a nickel for every time a dolphin to great white-sized pliosaurid found success in the Middle to Late Jurassic, I'd have quite a lot of nickels. Lipleurodon ferox might not be the biggest pliosaurid or even close to it, but it is the GOAT. This was the pliosaur that introduced me to the family, thanks to the incredibly oversized yet equally iconic version we see in Walking with Dinosaurs. It's still not a small animal by any reasonable measure. The real Lipleurodon has specimens that reach over 8 meters long and 6 tons, larger than a typical bull orca. Kenneth Branagh would be proud. Another large thalassophonian worth mentioning is the fragmentary Megalnusaurus rex, one of the first large pliosaurids ever discovered. Its stomach contents indicate that it really liked eating squid. It's too bad that we can't examine the bones again. I say fragmentary because while the holotype was pretty good originally, the bones are now lost. Sad how that seems to happen. A lot. The last subclade we'll cover is the Brachaucheninae, thalassophonian pliosaurids with exceptionally robust, powerful builds. Their skulls can take up a fifth to nearly a third of their total body length, showing a specialization through cephalization. Machaira rossica has an epic name, but terrible material. The ancient Greek sword deserved a better specimen to carry on its legacy. Acostosaurus is much better preserved, and may represent our first deep-water specialized pliosaurid. Its orbits were extraordinarily large, making space for big eyes that could absorb the maximum amount of light. This allowed Acostosaurus to hunt in deeper and less lit waters, darting through the gloom to snatch up squid and other appropriately sized prey. It lived in the Paja Formation of Early Cretaceous Colombia, a formation infamous for having multiple large pliosaurids in rapid succession geologically. That includes Sachicasaurus vitae, a gigantic uber pliosaurid with a skull the size of a small car. Sachicasaurus was the apex predator of the Paja Formation and is known from nearly complete remains. It would have preyed upon turtles, ichthyosaurs, smaller pliosaurs, and probably whatever else it wanted, honestly. When you're a fast carnivore the size of a bus, most other animals look like Lunchables to you. 3D modeling of rigorous skeletal reconstructions indicate a length of 10.3 meters and mass of just over 13 metric tons. Luscan italensis from early Cretaceous Russia took a completely different route from other Brachauchenines. It remembered the good old days of pliosaurids specializing in fish and decided to go back to hunting small prey, despite being quite a formidably sized carnivore itself at 6.5 meters and roughly 3 tons. Luscan had a long, thin skull, as opposed to the sledgehammer build common among its close relatives, and is thought to have focused on speed and precision strikes to capture fish and invertebrates, using its serrated teeth to cut through scales and soft flesh. It's also known from remarkably complete material preserved in 3 dimensions, making it a fantastic taxon for filling in gaps of less fortunate relatives. Stenorhynchosaurus munyosi is another denizen of the infamous and incredibly awesome Paha Formation. This formation just does a great job of preserving pliosaurids, it would appear, and Stenorhynchosaurus's nearly complete skeleton keeps that trend going. Its enormous hind flippers made it a fast and agile hunter, and it had the skull proportions consistent with the marine tyrannosaur build of other Brachauchenines. You know Kronosaurus. Everybody knows Kronosaurus queenslandicus, the devourer titan lizard of the sea. While not as robust as Sachicasaurus, it's still a titanic predator at over 11 tons. This Australian beastie represents one of the most extreme head-to-body ratios of any pliosaurid, with its skull taking up roughly a third of its entire length and it's long and wide without being overly tall. It lived in the Eromanga Sea, which covered a large portion of what is now modern Australia, and so would have hunted big marine prey as well as dinosaurs that strayed into the water or washed out to sea. A 2009 biomechanical analysis placed its bite force at roughly 30,000 newtons, a prodigious figure comparable to that of a small Tyrannosaurus rex. Brachaucheninae is surprisingly obscure for being such a large animal. And guess what? It's also from the Paha Formation, which I've decided must have been Pliosaurid paradise. At roughly 7.5 meters long and over 3 tons, Brachaucheninae was a mid-sized pliosaurid back then that would be one of the largest carnivores on the planet today. Giganotosaurus lived in the Paha Formation as well, somewhat later than the bigger Sachicasaurus. Whether or not it was a direct descendant is unknown, but it certainly maintained the status quo of domination by heavily built pliosaur. This mostly complete 10-ton beast was originally thought to be a South American species of Kronosaurus, until more recent analyses revealed it to be its own genus. Its skull was not only wide and long, but incredibly tall, providing a wide area for muscle attachments as well as allowing for potential ramming attacks against prey and rivals. It's crazy how we always think of the Cretaceous as mosasaur land when giant pliosaurids were apex predators for even longer. Brachaucheninae gives its name to the Brachaucheninae, and as you'd expect, typifies the clade with a large skull, short tail, and enormous flippers that enable speed and agility. It was discovered over 140 years ago in Kansas, and more specimens have since been uncovered in North Africa. It's funny how the namesake for the clade lived so much later than most of its relatives, but we don't get to pick the order in which we discover these things. Megacephalosaurus is a giant North American pliosaurid that was originally nested inside Brachaucheninae until more detailed studies in 2013. It's much larger than the genus it was once part of, at potentially up to 6 to 9 meters and 4 to 9 tons. Unlike the earlier Sachicasaurus and Giganotosaurus, Megacephalosaurus had relatively small teeth and a thinner skull, indicating a specialization for small-bodied prey like diving birds, fish, and invertebrates. It was the last hurrah for the pliosaurids, ending their 80 million year reign with a fierce final roar. The success of this group of marine reptiles cannot be denied. From small game specialists to deepwater hunters to ocean monsters that wouldn't be out of place in Subnautica, pliosaurids practically owned the seas of much of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, and surpassed the sizes of any known land predators. If you enjoyed this size, phylogeny, and physiology episode, you'd likely get a kick out of the other episodes in the series and may find it worth it to join the channel for loyalty badges and early access to videos. These animal group overviews don't tend to bring in a ton of people, but I have to admit that I enjoy them, so drop your suggestions for the clade I should cover next. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you the next time I find an excuse to gush about gigantic marine predators from Earth's ancient past.